Well, good evening everyone and welcome to Central's live stream. I want to get that count off the screen there again. A special welcome to this programme. Tonight is not a service as such. We're going to be looking at pictures and some video of our trip. There was a few of us went to Israel and Jordan in February, and so this is just some pictures and whatnot talking about that. It was going to be a report meeting in the church tonight, but that's all of course been changed, hasn't it? So this is going to be done. I was actually intending to have a video done of this and basically put a video up onto YouTube, and that quite hasn't worked out for me. So we're going to be doing this live tonight, and since we're doing it live, who knows what might go wrong. I'm getting little warnings coming up about the stream bit rate or something, and I'm not quite sure why that should be, that there might be a problem there, but anyway, there's not a lot I can do about that, I don't think. Okay, so there was 5 of us from Central went, and my wife Jean's sister Margaret and her husband Stuart went with us as well. And so there was that group from Ayrshire, the Ayrshire contingent if you like, and we went with a group which we were flying out from Luton, and the leaders were Ian and Ruth Coffey, and they were absolutely fantastic, as were our guides, when we were there, the local guides, so were absolutely fantastic. So without further ado, we'll get into some of the pictures and the story of that holiday. Okay, this is at Glasgow Airport. We were waiting for the flight, and of course the flight was cancelled. We eventually got to the car hire, realising that if we drove instantly basically down south we might get there in time, and that's what we did, but there was no cars, and then we were all standing discussing about getting buses back home and very disappointed about the whole situation when one of the girls at one of the counters shouted across, how many's in your party? And we said there's a 7 in our party, and she says I've just had an 8-seater cancelled. And so we were able to head south, and well, it wasn't the best night, to be honest. This is the kind of driving conditions. Oh, I've hit that too much. This is the kind of driving conditions particularly Stuart had in the first part of the drive, heading south down to about the Lake District area, and it was really wild and it wasn't very pleasant at all. But eventually we got to Luton, and eventually we had this. The plane took off. It was great. So we arrived in Tel Aviv, and our first stop was Netanya, and but of course en route we were a little bit tired from our journey. This is kind of what we were all feeling as we were heading across to Israel. We did cross over some absolutely stunning scenery. It was a clear day, and we looked down on some of the Greek islands and whatnot as well as we went across there. Now, we arrived at Netanya, but before that I'll just show you a little video clip of what we saw as we were arriving actually at Netanya. And this is the city as we approached it, heading for our hotel. So at Netanya, that's the Mediterranean Sea we're sitting on there, not far from Tel Aviv actually. And the next day we headed for Caesarea. Caesarea has got an amazing archaeological site. This, as you can see, is an amphitheatre. Herod the Great had a great part in building all this, trying to impress the Romans basically, but it's a vast site. As you can see, it goes right into the distance there. This was part of Herod's palace, and this was his swimming pool apparently. And this is the hippodrome, where they would charge round about in their horses and their chariots, racing each other, or doing all the kind of games that the Romans did. And this is a kind of map of it all. He built a harbour here where there was no natural harbour, which was quite a feat a way back. And this is dating Christ even. This was being built. So really worth the visit. Then we headed further north, and this is us in the Jezreel Valley. And one of the things that really struck me as we were going along here, our guide said, of course, just round the corner there, Saul and his sons were killed. And that put a shiver up my back to realise that, you know, I was actually here where all of these things that we've been reading about in our Bibles for years was actually happening. Now this on top of the hill here, this is Armageddon, the town of, or the town that was. It's an archaeological site at the moment, but this is the actual place, and of course being sitting up like that, had a commanding view up and down the valley. Then we headed for Nazareth, and this is Nazareth you see in the distance, the sun coming out and glancing on it. And we went to Nazareth Village. Now Nazareth Village is a charity that's run out of Edinburgh, I believe, as is the hospital that's next to it as well. And what they've done here is they've recreated, I mean obviously they didn't recreate the old olive tree that's probably at least 1,000 years old by the looks of it, but they recreated some of the buildings, etc., and they have people acting out parts on it, and they've even got the authentic donkey. As well as the shepherd here, he was called Abraham. And this is a reconstruction, they tell me, of a tomb. And this is based, its dimensions and everything are based on the kind of things that they've found in archaeological digs around the area. And so you see the stone there that would be rolled across the entrance. Quite a weight when you look at it. And up in the hill there is the hospital, and that's actually the hospital our own friend Clive Baird worked in earlier on in his life for, I think, 1.5 years or 2 years or something like that. Clive was there. And this is a watchtower. This is where you would stand up to make sure nobody's stealing your sheep or whatever it was you were trying to protect. And there was all sorts of buildings there as well, but this area here is actually a wine press. It's not a wine press, I suppose you would say it, but just behind where the guide is standing, that's where you would have the grapes, and the people would be tramping about in the grapes there, and the juice would run down into the hollow that's in front of them there, and that's how they collected it. You get a better view of a wine press like that when we get to the Garden Tomb a bit later on. Now this is a view over Nazareth from that area, and here is an olive press, or a Gethsemane. I don't know whether it's I think it's maybe an Aramaic word, Gethsemane, I'm not sure. But this is an olive press. The olives were put in here and you rolled this round about and that crushed them. And then you took the pulp, and this was the actual press here for squeezing the juice out of the pulp. And the pulp was put into these kind of basket type things. They put the pulp in there, and then that held the pulp and the juices squeeze out. And this is the local carpenter. His name was Joseph, so they said anyway. And he was using all the kind of tools that Jesus and Joseph indeed would have used way back in the 1st century. Now I've got a little video clip here that was taken at this area as well.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to a very special lady. This is Hannah, our weaver.
Hannah, our weaver. Shalom, Hannah.
Thank you, Hannah.
And so that was Hannah, and she was spinning and weaving, and it was really quite interesting watching what they were up to there. Okay, we then went to the synagogue. The synagogue in Jesus' day was the kind of place where it wasn't just used for religious ceremonies, it was a gathering place. It was the place you went to gather together for whatever reason. And so this was a recreation of a synagogue that might have been around at Jesus' time. And this fellow was called Zacharias. And I thought he was a statue standing there to start with, but he wasn't. He was real, as it turns out. So I'll give you a little video clip of what he was doing there.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Deuteronomy 6:4. Everyone, I introduce you to the head of our synagogue. This is Zachariah. Please say shalom. Shalom. Thank you.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set the oppressed free, to declare the year of the Lord's favour.
He then rolled up the scroll. He gave it back to the man in charge, which in our case would actually be Zechariah himself, and he sat down. And Jesus then declares, "Today these holy writings have been fulfilled in your hearing."
And so there we have Zacharias. And this is a kind of wider view of the synagogue. Another view across Nazareth, and you can see a mosque there with its gold dome in the middle. And as we were driving out, I saw this, a Christmas tree. This was February, and this is a mainly Muslim town, by the way, these days. So it seemed quite surprising to me. People get upset here about Christmas carols getting played or Christmas trees going up in case it offends the Muslims. Obviously the Muslims in Nazareth are not in the least offended, or it wouldn't be there. Then we went to Cana, or as we would call it here generally, Cana of Galilee. And this is a lady squeezing the pomegranates to give you fresh pomegranate juice. And then we went to this church, which is built on the site, they say, where Jesus turned the water into wine at the wedding at Cana. And this is a place where people come to, and that's what's happening here, people come to have their wedding vows renewed. This seems to be a popular thing to do here at this particular church. And then we went down into the archaeological dig below the church, and we found this. And this is a vat, a water vat, which is made from stone, which is quite different from what I thought of when I pictured the vats that Jesus turned the water into wine in. But this is apparently what they were like, big stone, and they are big, as you can see, stone jars that were just carved out of stone. This is an Orthodox church just across the road there. And of course you have to have the inevitable Cana wedding guest house, as well as the souvenirs, of course. Now this is us in Mount Tabor, the Mount of Transfiguration, they reckon anyway. And in everything I say here you could always put that "they reckon," because in some cases they're fairly sure, and in some cases are very good reasonings to thinking it, but it's not always the case. But this is where they reckon the Transfiguration took place. So this is the Church of the Transfiguration, a lovely building, built by an Italian architect who built quite a number of the churches out in Israel. He seemed to spend his life doing that, and he lived with the monks while he was doing the designing and the building and everything else, apparently. It's absolutely spectacular inside, as you can see. Very, very beautiful, very, very ornate. And here was Carol about to give us the reading that applied to that, which was something we did at all of the sites we went to. Somebody would read the scripture that related to it, which was really quite nice. Then as we come out, the heavens had opened, and it was, as we would say in Scotland, stunting. It was really, really heavy rain. It was cold. You're 2,500 feet up a mountain here, and it just felt like the west of Scotland and a cold day, to be honest. And do you know what my thoughts were? My thoughts were, Peter, I think I'm with you. I could really do with a tabernacle here to keep myself dry and to keep myself warm, because it really was misty and rainy. But I've got a little clip of what happened here, and this will give you an idea of the crowd we were with and what they were like. And so we got back down off the mountain. We were waiting there, by the way, for the buses, the minibuses to take us back down. That's why we had to hang about for a while. There was quite a lot of people there. And some of them didn't have the kind of rain gear that some of us had on either. So we got to Tiberias, and this is us looking out the window of our hotel at Tiberias, looking out onto the Lake of Galilee, of course. Unfortunately, the weather still wasn't brilliant, and we were getting misty in the distance. Next morning, we went to Bethsaida, and Bethsaida was supposedly a fishing village. Yeah, we went up a slight hill to get to it, but what they told us was that there had been a huge earthquake, about 1,000 years or so ago, and that had lifted that area quite a bit up, and so it no longer was sitting down by the lake because the whole ground had moved up, basically. But again, up there we were a bit like we were on the top of the mountain the previous day. It was wet and a little bit chilly, and it was pretty much like again a West of Scotland day up there. But here's what they reckon was a fisherman's house, and I take it the archaeologists have found evidence to make them suggest that this was indeed a fishing village. And it's quoting here Jesus seeing Peter and so on, fishing and asking them to come and follow him and be fishers of men. And this is Jean's very high class rain attire. And this is us at Capernaum, as the locals would call it. We call it Capernaum. And there's this quite moving statue, it is really, of a person, a homeless person sleeping on a bench, and the suggestion being, well, this is just what Jesus was like. He didn't have a home. And this is a church that's built on over an area that is reckoned to be a house that Peter stayed in. And I think they'll get fairly decent reasons for suggesting this. But there was a church built on top of that, which eventually got demolished, and there was a church built on top of that, which there's now a church built on top of that again, and this is what you're looking at here. But what they've done is they've kept it up on stilts, I suppose you would call it, so that the archaeological evidence is still totally intact below it here. And here we are inside where we had our reading at that point. And this is what we're looking down into. There's a glass floor where you can look down into the ruins in the archaeological dig area. And this is a Orthodox church that's there at Capernaum as well. And this is the remains, the ruins, I suppose, of the previous church that was there. And this is us just across from that, which they reckon was the local synagogue in Jesus' day. And as you can see, it was a fairly substantial building in those days. All sorts of carvings and rock carvings and so on. And on the right hand side here, it's maybe hard to make out in the picture, but this is supposed to be the Ark of the Covenant on a cart. So whether this relates to the incident that David had when he was bringing it back after the Philistines had captured it, I'm not sure, but that's what they reckon that carving is about. And then down at Galilee itself, very calm, although still a bit rainy as you can see, but lovely and calm. And here's Peter himself. I don't think the features would be taken from a picture that was taken in the 1st century, mind you, but somebody's imagination of what Peter looked like. We then went to Tabgha, and Tabgha, you'll notice it says Mensa Christi, which means the table of Christ, and this area is where Jesus multiplied the loaves and fishes, if you want to put it in those terms, but also the place where Peter was told, do you love me? Feed my sheep. And that's what this little church here represents. And here's a statue of Jesus telling Peter, feed my sheep. And here we are down at the lakeside. Again, as you can see, we can't see very much. It's a bit rainy and misty. And there was a mass going on at the church when we were there, and I just took this photograph looking in the door. But despite the rain, and despite the fact that it was February, there's all these lovely flowers blooming. It really was beautiful. And then we went to another site. We just walked around, and here's our guide, Natasha, telling us all about it. She was absolutely fantastic. She gave us so much information, whether it was about the biblical sites, or whether it was about the history, or whether it was about the politics. She was absolutely excellent, as were all our guides. And this is a little map of an area that Jesus seems to have concentrated on for time in his life. evangelical triangle, they're calling it. So you've got Tabgha, and you've got Bethsaida, and you've got Chorazin, and the Mount of the Beatitudes, and all of that stuff all around that area in the north part of the Sea of Galilee. And this is the church. And the mosaics here represent the fish and the loaves. Beautiful mosaics in that church. A lot of beautiful mosaics in the places we visited. And this, believe it or not, is a baptismal font. And the person and the priest, I take it, sat in there. And they were baptised that way. Quite interesting to see that, wouldn't it? And here we have, just growing by the roadside as we were waiting for the bus to come along for us again and pick us up, a mustard plant, which Jesus talks about, and obviously the kind of thing that people would be very familiar with, just growing at the side of the road there. Now, one day, quite a number of people went to a restaurant to have St. Peter's fish for their lunch. We decided not to do that. We went a little walk and we found this supermarket. And this is the spice counter in that supermarket. It was absolutely beautiful, and the smell was just astonishing. They do spices in a whole different way out in the Middle East from what we do here. Quite remarkable. Then we went up to the Mount of the Beatitudes, and this is the place that they reckon the Sermon on the Mount took place, and Jesus gave us the Beatitudes. And so I'm going to play you a little video clip now of Ruth reading those.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Thanks, Ruth.
And this is the little church there as well, which was really quite beautiful inside. All these buildings are and all different. This really was quite different. This is little windows round about the top here were all the different Beatitudes. And here's Jean at the back of the church looking down towards Galilee itself. And there was these stones all around with all the different Beatitudes on them as well. And there was also beautiful gardens with lovely flowers like this in them as well. And this is us looking back towards Capernaum. That's the Orthodox Church you see in the red there down at the side of the lake. And I took a picture of a couple of little birds when I was there, this one in flight. And here's this beautiful coloured one, and I can't remember what kind of birds they were now. I did look it up, but I've forgotten. It's nice to look at anyway. We then headed for the lakeside because we were going on a sail, and by this time it was evening basically. This boat here that you see is a model that was based on a boat that they dug up, and this is the kind of boat that would be used by Peter and John and these guys who were fishermen. Would be very similar to this, and the boat that we went on, they said, was built based on the kind of dimensions, and these are some of them here that they would have used in those days as well. As you can see, it was a beautiful evening. The sun was just about to set and it was absolutely spectacular. We went in a boat called Noah, thankfully not Jonah. So Noah was the name of the boat that we went on. And as we were drawing away from the quay, as you can see, it was so calm and so beautiful with the sun setting there in the background. And just to give you a feel for what it was like, I've got some little video clips that I put together that'll give you a feeling for what it was like on the lake there for us. This is just the boats manoeuvring there, and the sun setting as we went along. And as you can see, it was lovely and calm, which I was very grateful for, because as we know from the Bible, it can get quite stormy. And we were all really enjoying our sail.
Jesus took a cup, gave thanks to God and said, "Take this and share it among yourselves." In the same way he gave them the cup and said, "This cup is the cup of God's new covenant, and it's sealed with my blood, which is poured out."
Okay, so 1, 2,
3. Praise the Lord.
Into Tiberias, there was a quay right in front of our hotel, and so we sailed right there, straight in front of us there is our hotel, and that was just a lovely experience out there. A mixture, I suppose you would say, a mixture of the spiritual with communion, etc., and just the beautiful location. And a bit of the Jewish dancing came into it as well, of course. It was a lovely experience. So the next morning it was a bit brighter, still a bit misty in the distance, but as you can see, we can see the boat there on the lake. And this was us heading for Jordan, and this is us at the Jordan River Terminal here. Unfortunately, we had a little problem at the crossing. One of our party, her passport had slipped down the side of the seat in the bus, and she didn't realise that, and by the time realised there was a problem, the bus was heading for Jerusalem. So it took us about 5 hours to get through the crossing. Now, you don't get through these crossings quickly in the first place, but it took us 5 hours that day, unfortunately. It was a lovely day though, and we were all standing about getting to know each other actually, and we were also having little prayer groups to pray about the whole situation, that the whole thing would get resolved, which eventually of course it did, and we got on our way. And as we got on our way, we stopped for a toilet break or for somebody to buy some water or whatever, and there down the road you see the man with his children and his goats grazing at the side of the road. The Jordan Valley is really quite fertile, and this northern part of Jordan is quite green, as you can see, and they grow lots of vegetables, and that's quite different from the southern part, as we'll see a few slides on. And this is the school run done Jordanian style. As you can see, the kids there in the back of the lorry. And this is how some people live in Jordan. these are generally probably itinerant workers. There's about 10 million people in Jordan, but 1 million of those are Egyptian itinerant workers. They can get more money and better money by living in Jordan and working there. And so basically these are not actual tents, these are just bits of plastic, etc., that put over some sticks, etc., and that kind of thing. These are makeshift, but that's how they live. We then went to Mount Nebo. Mount Nebo is where Moses died, and that was a fascinating visit. I really thoroughly enjoyed that. And this is us looking over a valley here where, you know, if you'd been here at the right time, when the children of Israel were about to cross over the Jordan, they would have been camped around this area here. And that's Moses Spring, where the tree is there in the middle. There's a spring there, and that's called Moses Spring. There's quite a few Moses Spring around the Middle East there. Everybody wants to have a spring by Moses, but this was one of the springs that presumably the children of Israel used when they were passing through this area. And this is the town of Heshbon. It's now called Madaba. The modern town is Madaba, and that's where our guide Marwan came from. But this is the town of Heshbon, and you'll hear about that as the children of Israel are heading through towards the River Jordan to cross. They conquer Heshbon. And here we are up on the top of the mountain, and we're looking across the Dead Sea. So we're looking towards the promised land, if you like, and this would be the view Moses would get. Hopefully it was a little bit clearer when Moses was up there, so that he could actually see the promised land, but certainly if it was a clear day you could see for a great distance right across there. And here we were doing our usual appropriate scripture reading for the situation. Now the church, the building that was there, has been there for centuries, but I think it was the Franciscans that run it, and they've spent a lot of money on it recently, doing the whole building up and bringing the archaeological bits and pieces together so that everybody can see them, like these beautiful mosaics. And here's some of our folks looking over, admiring it all, and some of the mosaics have been taken up and preserved and put in the wall, so they get preserved there. Lovely place. It was a lovely place to visit. And here it was in the evening, as you can see, a lovely evening. And here's me at the gateway of the site as the sun's setting. And as the sun was setting, unfortunately for us, we still had to go to Petra to get to our hotel. And that's about 140 miles from here. 140 miles is not too bad, except that the whole road north-south is getting upgraded, and most of the way it was like 60 kilometre or 70 kilometre speed limits, and it was a bit of travail to get there. We eventually, I think, got our dinner about 9:30 at night, and by that time we were fairly hungry, fairly peckish, I think you would say. So this is Wadi Musa, which is the name of the town that Petra is at, or Wadi Musa is beside Petra, whatever way you want to put it. Petra's the ancient part. That's a World Heritage Site. It's called Petra, but the actual town itself is called Wadi Musa. And this is the view as I opened the curtains that morning that we had. And here we are at Petra. Now, this was spectacular. The rocks were just amazing. The Nabateans, who ran this place, ruled this place, lived here all centuries ago, decided to get water together to try and preserve as much water as they could, and these are some of the channels they used to move water from one part to another, and then they sold water to the people who were passing by, and that's how they made their money, and that's how they survived living here in this kind of what is a desert place really. And going through this valley, I suppose it was just quite amazing, quite amazing. It was lovely. And this is more that they had actually clay pipes that they used to funnel the water through. And you've got lovely colours in the rocks as well. I think that's what makes it so spectacular. Now, there's rocks like this which have just been worn away by the rain, etc. Not that there's a huge amount of rain there, I don't think, but this one just looks like an elephant to me. It's amazing. And of course you could get a run in a horse and cart if you were so inclined. Okay, I'm going to show you a little video clip that's maybe give you a better idea of what it was like walking through between these cliff faces. We'll fade to that. And here we are, following John through here, and this one here just gives you a feeling of the enormity of the spaces, and this is us coming through to the treasury, they call it. And if we cut to this one, this is us walking through, and we're getting the first glimpse through to the treasury there. And here it is, absolutely beautiful. And if you get up, take a zoom in and have a look at the detail work, considering this has been here for centuries, just quite amazing. And despite the fact that there was hundreds of people milling around, this wee dog was quite happily snoozing. Well, I was talking about the colours in the rocks. I think that gives you a fair indication of what I was talking about there. Quite amazing, the colours in some of these rocks. And the sun was just coming up. It was quite interesting actually, because we got there by 9 o'clock in the morning, and in the car park John counted 40 odd buses already there. This place opens at 6 o'clock in the morning. If you want to get there before the crowds, you get up early. And this was a Jordanian policeman. Now the Jordanian police come in all shapes and sizes, I discovered, because we had a Jordanian policeman on the bus with us. And here's Margaret with Mohammed. Margaret quite fancied Mohammed, as did I think all the ladies, to be honest. He was a handsome guy. But also when we were coming back out, they'd obviously changed the guard, and it was guys in what you would say traditional Arab gear who were the policemen on there on that occasion. So they obviously come in all shapes and sizes as far as their uniforms are concerned. Now this is the kind of things that you get here at Petra. These are tombs, and the fronts would be really decorated, and the richer you were, the fancier the decoration would be, of course. And that's Marwan there, who's our guide, our Jordanian guide. And this is inside that tomb. Just gives you an idea of what that's like. And all of these holes in the rock you see were tombs originally, I think, but these were places where locals lived for, I think, hundreds of years. But I think it was back in the 70s when this place was being set up as a World Heritage Site. They evicted everyone, but they gave them houses in the town. They built basically what we would call in Scotland a scheme, and gave them all houses. And the people who are working in Petra are actually all, they have to be either people who have lived here or descendants of people who have lived here to be able to work in Petra itself. Now, I don't know whether this is actually clear to you or not, but this is a rock that has got all sorts of colours, and Marwan is standing beside it here, and he's scraping some of the red off, and he says this is what they use for makeup. So this is, the red was your rouge, and the black stuff, well, that was your mascara. And here's a local guy with the black round about his eyes and so on. So even the guys use it. Maybe I should start it. I didn't check my lipstick before we started the broadcast. This is, I think they call this the cathedral. I think it was a church at one point before the people were evicted. But I mean, it's just, the site is vast, and it's just so interesting. You could spend days at this place just nosing about, looking at things. It would be amazing. Yeah, lots to see, and beautiful colours in the rocks. As you can see, this is me looking inside one of the caves, and it's just absolutely beautiful. Margaret and Jean up at the cathedral. And this is what the decoration inside the cathedral was like. That's natural rock, and somebody, I think, has painted the ceiling to tie in with the natural rock on the walls, and it was really quite spectacular, actually. Now, we decided that we would have a ride on a horse back towards the bus. And so here's Jean getting on her horse, and this is a little clip of me before I switched the camera off, because I was quite sure the camera was going to fall, riding along. And that's Stuart in the distance there. And there he is, going along, being led along. Now, the problem I had with this was, when I got halfway along, the guy who was leading me says, "Take the reins." Now, I'd been told to hold the saddle. And he says, "Take the reins." So I took the reins, and then he clapped the horse on the backside, and I took off like a rocket. The problem I had with that was, when I got to the end, he was looking for a bigger tip, because he had made me go fast. So obviously, if you frighten the living daylights out of somebody, you're due a bigger tip. I think that must be how it works. This is back at Wadi Musa, heading up to the hotel. And yes, I did buy a kafia, and this is me regaled in it in the hotel room. Next morning, we were up at the crack of dawn. I think our cases had to be out at 6 o'clock, if I remember right. But we were really, it really was early. It was another long day for us. But we had to get to the border. It was a Saturday, and we had to get to the border before the border closed. I think maybe because of the Jewish Sabbath, it shut at lunchtime. So we had to get there before that. And you saw what the north part of Jordan was like when we were coming into Jordan. A very fertile and green area. The south part of Jordan is a bit like this, and the southern part of Israel can be a bit like this as well. And you look at that and you wonder how anybody could possibly live there, but they have for centuries. And this is part of how they live. This is their goats going along the main road, herded along, and they just go in. If there's grass in the centre of a reservation and there's 3 lanes either side, they don't worry about that. They just get their sheep and their goats across there to graze in the middle. Now, this is us at the border. This is a little mosque just before we go through the border, and of course we weren't allowed to take photographs or anything at the border, so we haven't got any photographs of that as such. this is us now across back into Israel, but then back through a small border post, which back into what is actually Jordan, apparently, down to the baptismal site at the side of the Jordan River. And this is us looking across the river, and those are Jordanian soldiers across the river there we're looking at. Now there was loads of people being baptised in different ways. Some people that took their head and ducked them in, and other people that were getting sprinkled. I didn't see anybody getting a full immersion, but that was probably because the type of religious affinities that the people had who were being baptised. As you know, some people sprinkle, etc., as well as doing full immersion. So people were getting done in different ways, and some were getting done like this. And this was a Spanish speaking gentleman, and he had a group with him, and Carol just went on to the end of the group and she got baptised when she was there. Jean and Margaret decided they had to put their feet in. Now I'm not saying it was exactly enticing to put your feet in, as you can see from the colour of the water. I was very much with Naaman when I looked at that, and he says, "Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, far better than this?" Yeah, if it was looking like it was the day we were there, yes, is the answer. But because they'd had a fair bit of rain, that's why it was quite as muddy looking as it was. But it was an interesting visit. And from there we went to Jericho. This is us at the Temptation Restaurant in Jericho, where some folks went in for a meal. We had falafels from the stall there. First falafels I ever had. Enjoyed it. And here's the camel, giving camel rides round about the car park if you wanted that. And then there was Elisha's fountain. And this is the fountain where, I think, the spring where the people were getting poisoned, and Elisha, I can't remember what he did exactly, but he purified the water. And this is us up on the archaeological digs at Jericho, looking across to the mountain where they reckon Jesus was tempted, or some people reckon anyway. So that's the mountain across there. This is just looking across to the town of Jericho, the modern town of Jericho, and this is some parts of the ancient town of Jericho. There wasn't a huge amount to see there really. And on the way back up to Jerusalem, and just out of interest, Jericho is 251 metres below sea level. That's about 825 feet, I think. And Jerusalem is 700 and odd metres above, which is over 2,500 feet. So if you're going from Jericho up to Jerusalem, you've got to climb 3,380 odd feet to get there. Quite a difference in levels. And this is our first view of Jerusalem. The bus driver brought us in via the Mount of Olives, and we were able to look across at the Golden Dome and the Al-Aqsa Mosque, etc., and across the city generally. And as I opened the window to have a look across to what is the Anglican Cathedral, I think it was St Michael's, I'm not sure about that, and we see our next door neighbour Steve here. He's very lucky, he's got a balcony, and he's out enjoying the evening sun there as well. And we had a walk down towards the Damascus Gate, which is one of the big gates of the old city, in the old city walls, which was only about a 9 or 10 minute walk away from our hotel. Our hotel was very handily positioned. This was across the road from the Garden Tomb, and the Garden Tomb again was only about maybe 7 minutes walk, I suppose, away from us. And this is down near the Damascus Gate. As you can see, it was evening, and the evening last rays of sun are catching the Damascus Gate, and it's really looking quite resplendent there. Next morning, up early as usual, and we're up the Mount of Olives. Looking across, you can see the Golden Dome in the middle there, and etc., and the walls of Old Jerusalem. Looking down towards the city walls, that's the Al-Aqsa Mosque there. The Golden Dome isn't actually the mosque, it's more a historical site, if you like, a monument, I suppose you might call it. But this is the actual mosque itself on the Temple Mount. And this bit at the side of the Temple Mount is where they reckon they used to sell the various things and the money changers would be, and this is where Jesus caused havoc by shouting at them and turning over their tables and telling them to get out of here. God's house should be a house of prayer. Then, looking from the Mount of Olives down towards the Teardrop Church and the Russian Orthodox church there with the golden onion-shaped domes. I just love that building. These onion-shaped golden domes are beautiful. And this is looking across to the old walls, and that particular gate is called the Golden Gate. And if you can see, if you're looking at a big enough picture, you'll notice it's blocked up. And that was blocked up by, I'm not sure who, I think it was maybe the Ottomans, because the Jews' prophecy was that the Messiah would come from the Mount of Olives. And so they decided they would block that gate so the Messiah couldn't get in that gate. But of course we know they were too late, because he had already come in to Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. And this is the cemetery on the Mount of Olives. The most expensive pieces of real estate you'll find in Jerusalem, basically. The cheapest place you can get yourself buried here is $10,000 apparently, and the prices go up depending on how good your view is, I think. And this is all of us, well, I think apart from two of us, gathered together up on the Mount of Olives for a picture. 49 of us there was on the trip, and then we had our guide. And this is some of the boxes, I forget what they call them, but basically what happened was the bodies were put in the tombs and they were left there for a certain length of time, and after a certain length of time, when the bodies had decayed, they then gathered the bones and put them in these boxes, as I suppose it saved space, saved real estate. That's the way they used to do it. I don't know whether probably some folks still do that kind of thing in some countries today, I don't know. And here was Steve reading the scriptures near the Garden of Gethsemane, but just sort of halfway down the Mount of Olives. And Steve was reading here, and although we don't look as if we're paying attention, we've all got our earbuds in and we're listening to Steve. He's got the microphone there. And this is the Teardrop Church. Another view across the old city. Another view of the Russian Orthodox church there. And this is the Garden of Gethsemane. A garden in those days was a cultivated place, not necessarily a place with flowers that we would quite often associate with a garden these days. And but some of the trees in here are really ancient, and I'll show you another one in a minute that they reckon is probably even older than Jesus' time. Okay, this is inside the Church of All Nations at the Garden of Gethsemane. Sometimes it's called the Church of the Agony, and as you can see, it's absolutely spectacular. The decoration in it, the gold leaf and everything was just amazing. We were in some beautiful buildings on this trip, we really were. And here's the motley crew, better known as the Ayrshire contingent, getting our photo taken here. And that's the Golden Gate behind us there, the one that was bricked up or blocked up, and you can see the Golden Dome in the distance there at the Temple Mount as well. And here's one of those trees I was talking about, which is really ancient. They reckon it could be about 3,000 years old, I think they said. One of the things about olive trees is they're almost perpetual, because when one part of the tree dies, there's always other parts that grow up from the root themselves. And so the tree just continues, but it's the same root, so it's the same tree. Now this is also at the Garden of Gethsemane. They reckon when Jesus and his disciples went up to the garden and went up the Mount of Olives, they probably gathered in a cave like this. There's a couple of these on the Mount of Olives, and this one, as you can see, has been turned into a chapel. And it's speculated that perhaps this is where Jesus was betrayed. But of course nobody knows. That's one of the issues about these places, isn't it? And this is a garden at the Garden of Gethsemane, a garden more like what we would consider a garden, with flowers as well as the trees, etc. And this is the front of the Church of All Nations. Beautiful building. And then we went from there to Bethlehem, and this is our guide Francisco. And this is a view across the town. We first went to the Shepherd's Field, and this is the area where traditionally they believe that the shepherds were at when they got the message that Jesus had been born in Bethlehem and that they should go and see him. And again, there's caves involved, and they reckon the shepherds would use these caves, and this is one that's at the Shepherd's Field that they reckon the shepherds may well have been using. Now, whether they used it to shelter themselves or whether they used it to put their sheep in and they guarded the door of it, I'm not quite sure, but we were in there and there certainly wasn't any sheep at the time we were there. And here we're getting a reading once more. And I think it's the only cave in the world with a 3-manual Wurlitzer organ. I was pretty impressed at that. Now, I've got a little clip of us singing in there and also in the church beside it.
Come, let us adore in Christ the Lord. For he alone is worthy, for he alone is
And this is the dome of that church. Lovely, lovely building with beautiful murals on the wall of the incidents with the shepherds and Jesus being born. And we had lunch in Ruth's restaurant. We had falafels in there as well. And there was an old lady going about who was obviously the boss woman, and I reckon since this was Ruth's restaurant, she must be Naomi. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then you should maybe go to the Book of Ruth and find out. So we carried on in Bethlehem. One of the things we did that I don't actually have photographs of, we went to a shop where I should have put a photograph in of that. We went to a shop where they do local crafts, and it's Palestinian Christians who do the crafts. And if actually the sun's disappeared, so I'm maybe a bit dark for you, but they did things like this. This is the carved hands, and this was Palestinian Christians who carved these things, and there was some amazing carvings, beautiful carvings in that place as well, and loads of other types of crafts as well. And this is us outside the Church of the Nativity at Bethlehem. We had to wait to get in here because there was a funeral going in, and those poor people had to have their funeral at the front of the building with hundreds of tourists around, and of course we were some of those as well. When we got into the building, there was so many tourists that our guide told us it would take us 3 hours to actually get down to the cave underneath where Jesus is supposed to have been born, and we decided 3 hours was just too long. The thing I like about this church is it was built in 330 AD and it's been worshipped in continuously since. And then next door you have St Catherine's, and St Catherine's is a Roman Catholic church and a lovely building, and what I liked particularly about it was the fact that there was nobody there but us, and it was beautiful. This is St Jerome. He was believed to have, he was in the cave where Jesus was believed to have been born, and he was translated the Bible from the original languages into Latin. This is St George, believe it or not. The dragon, of course, representing evil. And this is the cross of Jerusalem, the Jerusalem cross, where you've got the cross for representing Jesus, and then you've got the 4 apostles, and I think there's other interpretations of that as well. And this is a carving of the baby Jesus that's about the size of most adults. It was a kind of astonishing kind of thing. I just had to take a picture of it. And here is looking across Bethlehem, looking back across to Jerusalem, I think, really there. And of course there's the inevitable souvenir shop. In this case we've got the John the Baptist souvenir shop. And if you wanted to buy the Ark of the Covenant, you could. In the bus station, believe it or not, you could buy the Ark of the Covenant. And here we were outside waiting in the bus to go from our hotel to the Dead Sea. This was the Christmas hotel that we stayed in the centre of Jerusalem. Now, this is a picture of the Dead Sea, and the thing that's strange about this picture, I've realised, is if you notice there's red in the middle of the picture. The red in the middle of the picture is flowers. I think it's some kind of anemone, I believe. And this is most unusual, but they've had a lot of rain during the winter, and so this area is green and it's blooming. And I was watching a video by a young couple who have lived in Nazareth, I think, all of their days, and who have visited this area plenty of times, and they've never seen it anything other than brown. And they asked some locals who were older, who had been here all their lives, does this happen often? And they'd said they had never seen it. So this is something that hasn't been seen for 50 or more years. It's actually green and blooming along the side of the Dead Sea. And this was a sinkhole that came up and swallowed the road. Luckily, nobody was hurt, I believe. But this is us going up Masada. This is an amazing fortress. So I was at the top of Masada looking back across towards the Dead Sea and the salt lakes. And this was quite an amazing place. The Romans besieged it, but it was almost unconquerable, but they did eventually manage to conquer it. And Herod built a palace here, and this is part of the steam rooms here, and this is the the central heating, there's fires underneath, and the tubes up the wall heated the walls as well. But it's quite an amazing plateau. I expected it just to be a little thing, but it's a plateau up here. They actually grew crops up here as well. And this is part of Herod's palace, and this would have been what you might have called the panorama room, because the views were spectacular from it. And this is the kind of cliffs that the Romans were trying to get up. And this was how they managed to hang on for so long, was the fact that they stored water in these cisterns, and they had a lot of water stored, so therefore they could last for a long time. But these people down there are standing on a ramp that's part of the ramp that was built by the Romans to conquer the city. You can imagine how long it took them to build a ramp high enough to get up those cliffs, and eventually they broke through and took over the city, by which time the people had killed themselves basically. And sometimes it was a hard day. And these are caves in the rock, one of which they believe it might have been around here that David cut the tail of Saul's robe off, if you remember that story. And this is called David's Spring, and there's a lot more water here than I was expecting, because you're basically in a desert area there, and here it was, loads of water, more maybe when we were there than there would normally be, because there had a lot of rain. And these are the caves at Qumran where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And this is us in the Dead Sea. Stuart took these pictures. I didn't take my camera. Cameras and the Dead Sea don't go together. But here we were. It was the most weird experience. Our feet just felt totally weightless, and the difficulty of course was getting back up again. But we did. And some of our group used the mud on their skin. Apparently it makes your skin beautiful. So I think by the looks of Margaret there on the left, I think she should have really, really, really beautiful skin by now. And the next morning, again, up early as usual, we were at the Garden Tomb by 8 o'clock. And this is the rock face that used to look like a skull, but because of erosion, things that it's changed now, you can't really see a skull in the rock. But if this was the place where Jesus was buried, then possibly where the buses are roughly is where he may have been crucified, because that was a main road going from the Damascus gate towards Damascus, as you might expect. And so that's the kind of places that they crucified their criminals, was at the side of the road where everybody could see. And this is another wine press, and the grapes would be put in there and the guys would jump about on them, and the bit at the front there was lower, and that's where they collected the grape juice. And this is the tomb itself. The stone's no longer there, but you can see the bit where the stone would have rolled. And here's a kind of idea of what a plan of the tomb, what it would look like, with two places for two bodies, and the bit at number 6 there, the antechamber, the weeping chamber where the family would go to weep. And this is it inside. And this is what I was talking about. You can see here, this tree's basically dead, but from it, this is an olive tree, from the roots, here's growing the new shoots, and so the tree carries on. And we had a very moving time there. We had communion at the Garden Tomb, and that was really lovely. A lovely garden as well, lovely peaceful place, just smashing, loved it. the British food hygiene regulations wouldn't maybe quite see eye to eye with how they sell food out here, but well, they've survived for thousands of years, so who am I to tell them what to do? This is us going in what's called the Flower Gate, or sometimes called Herod's Gate, to go through the city. Always loads of colourful vegetables and fruits. This pattern on the wall is a Muslim person who has been to Mecca. He's made that pilgrimage, and he's allowed to put these kind of insignias on the wall to show that he has done that. And when you're walking through the old city of Jerusalem, you just feel history. It's an amazing place. This is St Anne's. St Anne is the mother of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And this basilica is just beside the Pool of Bethesda. And the Pool of Bethesda, as you can see, is not much to look at now. Maybe it wasn't much to look at in Jesus' day either, but any little drop of water was precious, so who knows what it was like in those days. Now, this is inside St Anne's Basilica, and it was a kind of amazing place because the reverberation time in this building is 12 seconds. In other words, if you clapped your hands and there was nobody else there and it was quiet, it would take 12 seconds for the sound to die away. So I'm going to play a clip of us singing in this place, and anybody can sound good in this building. An emotional experience, and there was another group come in after that and they were singing How Great Thou Art, and that was pretty amazing as well. As we come outside, then we started walking through the city, and this will just give you a feeling of walking along some of these bits in Jerusalem. As you go along the Via della Rosa, oh, I've put the wrong thing on. That's okay, my audio's on. I thought my audio had gone off there. As you go along the Via della Rosa, you find these signs. This is the first station, and there's various things. This is where Pilate had Jesus whipped, I think, and there's various stations as you go along. And as we went along, we went into the Sisters of Notre Dame of Zion. And why did we go in there? Well, we went in below the building and in below the Via Dolorosa, and it's astonishing. You're metres below the ground level, and here's what you've got. They've dug out all of these places that were around in Jesus' time, and the place that he was held, the fortress, some of the old foundation walls are here, down here as well. It was an amazing place to go into. And when we get back up into the sunshine, we find the soldiers armed to the teeth, as you can see. Our guide said, don't worry about the soldiers in their station. It's when they're not in their station you got to worry, because they're a way to deal with something. So we saw plenty of soldiers as we went along. Another of the stations, I think this was Simon of Cyrene helping Jesus with the cross. Their spice stalls and their dried fruit stalls were so colourful and so aromatic. It was absolutely beautiful. They do spices out there. We buy spices in little jars and little packets. I saw a guy with a bag that was like a carrier bag you would use in a supermarket, and he was shoveling spices into it. That's kind of how they use spices out there. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where the Catholic Church, the Orthodox, the Coptics, I think there's maybe the Aramaic Church as well, I'm not sure. There's a few in here who look after this church and who believe this is the point where Jesus was crucified and entombed as well. So this is the other traditional, the more traditional point. And we were on the roof here, and these are monks' cells here where the monks live. And their guide took us through places. This is the benefit of having a local guide. Took us through these monasteries, two different monasteries on the route down to the front. This is the front of where you would go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. We didn't actually go in because we didn't have time. We were trying to cover so much ground, and we had a free day the next day, which was our last day. So anybody that wanted to could have come back, but it was the same problem there as going into Church of the Nativity. So many people, so you had to queue up for a long time to see the sights. And our guide pointed this out to us and says, this is what we do with unexploded bombs. They go in here. Which kind of brought it back to you that you were in Jerusalem. The strange thing about the Church of the Nativity is the people who run it couldn't make up their mind, couldn't agree with each other who would hold the keys. And it's ended up, they made an agreement with two Arabic families who are Muslims. And so it's Muslims who actually have the keys for one of the most holy sites in Christendom. Jerusalem's a strange place. It's a one-off for sure. And here we are, more food. The markets in the old city were just amazing, absolutely amazing. And here's a guy getting his shoes mended, and as you can see, it's the shoes off his feet, and I think he's needing his socks darned as well while he's there. And they do butchery in a different way from us, as you can see. This intrigued me. This is a whole fridge full of pigs' trotters. And since the Jews are not supposed to eat pigs and the Muslims are not supposed to eat pigs, I really wondered who ate all these pigs. But our guide told us that you are not allowed to breed pigs on Israeli land. So what they do is they build wooden platforms up from the ground, and they breed the pigs on the platform, so they're not breeding the pigs on the ground. They're inventive, you have to say that. And this is part of the dig of the old Roman road that went through the centre of the city. This is outside the main mosque, I think, in the city. I forget what they call this, the demolished mosque or something like that, or the ruined mosque, because it's been ruined so many times over the centuries. But the Jews being the Jews, they just keep rebuilding it. You got to give them it. And this was a group from an American Destiny Church who were there, and they were doing a Jewish dance in the centre of the square. This is us going in the Zion Gate, I believe this is. Well, we're actually going out the city through this gate, and this is the kind of sights you see around the city. You've got a soldier on the right hand side, or a policeman, and you've got a policeman or a soldier again, a girl in front of us there with her pistol at her side, and you've got the two Orthodox Jews coming towards us, going about their daily business. And this is the upper room, or what may be the site of the upper room. This is not the upper room, but it may be the site of the upper room. Bigger place than I expected, actually. And then we went to David's tomb. and we had to put on our, it was a place of prayer, so we had to put on our little caps, which they provided. And the ladies went to a separate prayer room. And this is a view up to the Mount of Olives from that area. And then this is a church built on the site of Caiaphas's house where Jesus was tried. A beautiful building, and I liked it in there because, again, we were about the only people who were there, so it was lovely and quiet and peaceful. You could sit and think for a minute if you wanted to. Beautiful building. And then underneath it was what you would call, I suppose, dungeons. And this is believed to be where Jesus was probably held while he was on trial. And this is a path they've excavated from the Roman time that Jesus may well have walked up. And of course this is the site of Peter denying Jesus as well, and that's what this statue is about. And some, I don't know whether it's dates that's on the tree, but it looked good, whatever it was. And this is us going through the Dung Gate, and the Dung Gate is the entrance near to the Western Wall, or the Weeping Wall as we would often call it. And so again, the men and the women were separated, and we had to wear our little caps again, and to go into this area. And this is a couple of our rabbi brothers. And there was these young girls with some serious weaponry hung around them. It turned out they were schoolgirls who were cadets. And wow, these are some guns they've got to be schoolgirls. And this is the dig at the City of David area. And when you get into the toilets and the washrooms, there's often a cup like this, and this is a ceremonial cup for hand washing, for the ceremonial Jewish hand washing. This is more of the dig area, and this is us looking down the Kidron Valley, and that's the Mount of Olives ahead of us there. And then we went to a museum, and this was basically a model of the old city, including the temple, Herod's temple I think at the time. And we went in there too. We couldn't take pictures inside, but the Dead Sea Scrolls and things like that were inside. Next day we had just a free day, and Margaret and Stuart and Jean and I just decided to walk round the walls, and we found another Christmas tree. But that was really good. This is David's Tower, they call this. We got up onto the top of the walls, which was really good because you get great views across the city. And we walked round the top of the walls as far as we could. There was some very strange electrics and plumbing going on at places. And this is one of the big churches in Jerusalem. I'm not sure what you call that one. And again, we're coming in view of the Golden Dome. And this is us looking down towards the Dung Gate on the left there, and the Mount of Olives in the distance. And across the valley there, the tomb of Absalom. Although they don't reckon Absalom was actually buried there, but I think one of the prophets, Zechariah, or some of them, they reckon is actually buried there. And again, this is the Russian Orthodox Church, and the Church of All Nations. And this is Jerusalem traffic. They're trying to get in and out of that gate, and it was pandemonium, absolute pandemonium. We went into the Austrian Hospice, it was called, and had some very nice apple strudel and a coffee, and we could go onto the roof there, which is one of the highest buildings because of where it sits in the old city, and you could see right round. This is the front of the building. Again, colourful, colourful. This is the Damascus Gate, so we're getting close back to the hotel. And our final day, we went to the Holocaust Museum. Again, weren't allowed to take photographs in there, so I haven't got any photographs of that. But this is us at Jaffa on our last day before we fly home, and we spent some time here, and it was lovely in the sunshine. And that's us looking across. The modern town there is Tel Aviv, and this is us in the older town, which is called Jaffa. And this is the church of St. Peter. St. Peter's got a lot of churches, but this is the point at which they believe Peter was told to go and see Cornelius, or called to see Cornelius. Again, a lovely building, and although it looks like marble all round, it was actually painted because they couldn't afford the marble, I suppose. Very nicely done. And down nearer the harbour we had this lovely fountain. And here's Ian and Ruth, relieved that they're getting us to the end of our journey without losing any of us. And this amazing statue that John found, and it's 3 Bible stories, and I can't remember exactly which Bible stories they were about, but you could work it out if you thought about it, I suppose. And this is the view down towards the beach in Tel Aviv. And I was quite intrigued by their t-shirts. America, don't worry, Israel's behind you. I thought that was a good one. And so we got to the end of our journey, and this is us heading for the bus for the last time. And that didn't, and as we were heading there, 4 lanes in each direction, and here's a guy out in the middle selling bread to anybody who would buy it, only in Israel. And so onto the plane and heading home with some lovely views over the city of Tel Aviv as we took off. And so that was our trip to the Holy Land and Jordan. I do hope you enjoyed it. We certainly did. Thanks for listening in and watching in, of course. Bye.